Some things happen without explanation. Some experiences haunt people for a lifetime. This is where I tell those mysteries. And remember, not everything can be explained. Story. Take out your AirPods immediately. Soon you won't be able to. I'm breaking every NDA on the planet by posting this, and I don't think things will go well for me once it's out. That doesn't matter though. All that matters is that you believe me. Those shiny new AirPods you got, all sleek and slim and white as fresh bone, you need to stop using them. Hell, to be safe, you should throw them away, burn them, hurl them into the ocean, or bury them deep in a locked box full of salt. I know the thought of tossing out those tiny little slices of the future you wear in your ears is painful, but it must be done. If you don't listen to me, if you keep using your AirPods, soon you'll start to hear terrible whispers. That is, if you aren't hearing them already. I'm sure I sound crazy. At first, I thought maybe I was going insane. That would be a more comfortable scenario than what's really happening. I thought working at Apple would be my dream job. For a few months, it truly was. Life was like some high-tech, minimalist fairy tale. Everything was bright and polished. Everyone I worked with was sharp and brilliant. And the cafeteria food was fucking amazing. Then, one day, about 4 months after I started at Apple, I stumbled upon some dead code. It was just a few orphan lines in a massive briar patch of an update. Blink and even a skilled coder would miss the anomaly. It was pure luck that I spotted the quirk. I reported the dead code to my supervisor, who assured me he'd kick the issue up the ladder and it would be patched. I offered to work on the reconfiguration myself, but was politely, firmly told not to worry about it. I've always been burdened with more curiosity than common sense, so I promptly ignored my supervisor's instructions and began to dig. I ended up digging myself right into a coding mass grave. There are lines of dead code in every Apple update we've ever put out. It goes all the way back to the beginning. As far as I can tell, on their own, each errant string is harmless. Stack them all together though, and there's something wrong about the pattern, something horrible and hungry, something that seems to be on the verge of waking up. My first guess was that it was hidden messages, probably subliminal advertising. You'd be listening to the latest Taylor Swift song, and right as she hits the chorus, some elusive voice chimes in to tell you that Chick-fil-A always has the cure for whatever you're craving. It would be slimy if that was Apple's plan, but hardly the first use of underhanded marketing in America. I wish advertising was all this was. It's far worse. My initial guess was half right. You will start hearing hidden messages through your AirPods, but it won't be a subtle nudge to buy chicken. There will be whispers, so soft you might think it's your imagination. These whispers will make beautiful promises. They'll tell you stolen secrets and offer you every desire submerged in the darkest depths of your heart. Yet all of that will come at a horrific price. The whispers will make you do things, hurt things, yourself and other people. I don't know why, I don't know how, but if I'm reading the code correctly, you'll start to feel a push, an urge to damage the fragile things you love most. How could this have gone unnoticed for so long? The irregular code is hard to find, sure, but someone must have caught on at least once. Did they go to their supervisor just like I did? Did they listen when they were inevitably instructed to let it go? Or did they go digging like I did, digging until they dug themselves a 6x6 hole before they were buried along with their curiosity? I know right now you're still skeptical. I understand, really I do. AirPods are expensive, they're chic, more of a personal statement than a gadget. They're like earrings if Ray Bradbury designed jewelry. Maybe your AirPods were a Christmas gift from a friend or significant other. I don't expect you to only take my word for it. All I want you to do is keep an open mind, and, more importantly, an open ear. The whispers will be difficult to catch. The voices will be woven into your songs, your podcasts, your audiobooks. That's the terrible efficiency of Apple. Now that you know what to look for, though, you might be able to pin down a whisper like a butterfly to a board. Even if you can't notice the voices, be on the lookout for unexplained, violent urges. Set the sentry of your mind on guard against intrusive thoughts. If you feel your fingers linger on the throat of your child while you're fixing their collar, you'll know I was right. If you find yourself wondering exactly what shade of red your lover's lifeblood would be, you need to act immediately. I don't know why Apple wants us to rip the world apart. It could be a social experiment for the government. However, when I follow the strings of dead code and fit the pieces of the puzzle together, one on top of another, I see such strange and revolting designs. The symbols look ancient, twisted and squirming, like no other coding language I've ever seen before. It hurts my eyes to look at if I stare for too long. The higher-ups here are onto me. Maybe they were watching me from the beginning, but I don't think they expected me to move so quickly. I've barricaded myself in my office. They're trying to force the door, and it doesn't look like it will hold much longer. The frame shudders with every impact. It should last long enough for me to post this, though. Once the warning is out, I've done all I can. I'm not sure what will happen to me when they get in. I'm scared. But this was the right choice, the only choice. So don't let it be for nothing. Put away your AirPods. If you don't believe the danger, at least listen closely. Search for the whispers. Whatever you do, don't believe anything they tell you. Don't accept anything they offer. Listen for them, but don't let them in. Story. There's a woman trapped in my basement. She needs my help. You don't expect to find new things in old houses, particularly when you've lived in the house for a decade without any surprises. But one Tuesday in November, while I was putting summer junk into storage, I heard soft crying from the corner of my basement. "Jenny?" I asked, setting my unopened beer back in my emergency cooler. "You know you're not supposed to be down here." The crying stopped. I was worried my daughter had followed me down. The basement was cramped full of all of the odds and ends we couldn't fit into the shed, and dotted with the occasional rat trap. I'd killed a snake down there back in July. Overall, it wasn't a place I wanted my 4-year-old to hang out. "Jenny," I said, moving towards the dark corner where I'd heard the sobbing. "Daddy's not mad, but you shouldn't be down here." The basement was dim, spacious, prone to mild flooding. A single light bulb hanging from a chain cast angular shadows throughout the room. The shadows seemed darker today, especially around the back corner farthest from the stairs. That was where I'd heard the crying, where I walked, confused. There was a shape hidden in the dimness, a profile in the corner. The thing was larger than my daughter. "Hello?" I asked, stopping several feet from the corner. A sudden coldness took me. I was afraid. "Please," the shadow in the corner said. "Please, help me." It crawled forward, and my fear began to change to concern. First, a hand emerged from the darkness, pale and slim. Then an arm, a graceful shoulder, a slender neck. Finally, a face, striking and familiar, though I was certain I'd never seen her before. That was as far as the woman came into the light. It was far enough for me to see she was beautiful and in trouble. On second glance, her slenderness verged on starvation, her deep blue eyes frightened, her black hair a tangled mess. Her torso and legs remained hidden in the dark. I worried she was injured. Maybe there was an accident. I took a step forward, then froze. How did a strange woman get into your basement? Why is she? My eyes locked with hers, and all questions fled my mind. Her irises were huge, blue as the ocean in January, and heavy with pain and need. "Please," she said again, in a familiar voice I knew I'd never heard before. "Please, help me." "How? Are you hurt?" I did my best to peer into the shadows over and around the girl, to see more than an arm and face, but the dark was stubborn. Some reptile slice of my brain prevented me from getting any closer. "Help," she said, staring up at me. "Hungry." She did look hungry. I could see a hint of ribs under her arm. Her collarbone stuck out clear and bowed between shoulder and neck, her cheekbones sharp as barbershop razors. "Call 911. Call somebody." Those eyes again, catching me like a spider from a tunnel, driving my thoughts far and away. "Okay," I heard myself answer. "Let me find you something to eat." The girl stared long, head tilted, then finally blinked and smiled. She had lovely teeth. I felt unstuck when she blinked. My feet were my own again, and I backed towards the stairs. "Just wait here," I told her. Just wait. I'll be back." "With food?" she asked. I didn't trust myself to speak, so I nodded and took the stairs, 2 at a time. Sarah. My wife was in the kitchen, pen in mouth, bills and checkbook on the table. Did you use the visa last week? She asked without looking up. I'm seeing weird charges. Jenny was sitting at the nook, coloring in her new book, watching the rain tap the window. I don't think I used the card, I lied. But not important. There's something in the basement I need you to see. The absurdity of the situation was settling in. A pale, starving girl in the basement? It seemed more likely I was losing my shit, but on the off chance, I wasn't bonkers. I needed second-party confirmation. Can it wait? Sarah asked, gesturing at the papers in front of her. I stood staring. It's something you should see, though. Sarah tilted her head. Have you been... She made a drinking motion. Again? Sarah was giving me her concerned look. The one that shared a fence with her irked one. Hi, Daddy, Jenny called, waving from the nook. Hi, Jenny, I replied, suddenly feeling exhausted. I turned to my wife. Never mind about the basement. It's not important. And no, I haven't. Haven't what? Jenny asked. Haven't forgotten that you're my favorite girl, I said, winking. Don't tell your mom. Jenny giggled. I opened the fridge. Don't ruin your lunch, Sarah whispered, as I walked downstairs into the basement carrying some deli meat, cheese, and grapes. Just a snack. The basement seemed darker. There was a haze settled over everything. When I closed the door at the top of the stairs, the room was immediately pitch black. In the corner, a soft blue-white glow beckoned. It was the woman. She'd crawled farther out of the shadows, so that now only her lower half was hidden. Signs of malnutrition etched her body like scrimshaw. Her skin stretched tight against her ribcage. I thought I saw small tears like a frayed sweater. Dark blue veins wove across her, horribly apparent against her pallor. Everything about her was shriveled and pathetic. Everything about her was beautiful, hard to look at, painfully gorgeous. Hungry, she whispered. I descended the stairs and set down the food on the basement floor in front of her. She doesn't look at it. Not that, she told me. Can't eat that. Then what? I asked. There were tears in my eyes. You know, you've always known. I shook my head. I won't. You can't. I won't let you. The girl in the corner stared at me a moment, then crawled closer. As she pulled more of her body from the shadows, I could see that her torso ended not in legs, but in slick, red tendons and ropey intestine. Her insides spilled out behind her, coiled together into a thick, wet thread that trailed back lost in the dark. She reached a hand to my face, gently brushed my cheek, then wrapped her hands around my throat with an impossible grip and pulled me towards her. Then we were moving, then somehow we were falling into the blackness behind the girl. We should have hit the wall of my basement, but there was no resistance, only darkness and the sense of free fall. I couldn't scream, her hands locked so lovingly, so tightly around me. After what felt like hours, I began to see light. It was the girl, glowing, eyes locked to mine. All around us, new lights began to pop up one by one, like new stars waking. Our free fall gave way to floating. I remembered vividly the one time in my life I'd gone night diving. As we drew closer to one of the lights, I saw that it was another glowing person. A boy this time, handsome from the torso up, a torn ruin from the waist down. He too trailed a grisly thread behind him that stretched away into the dark in the same direction as the line connected to the girl. When we drew close to the boy, he smiled, then darted forward and took a small bite from my shoulder. This time I was able to scream because the girl took one hand from my throat to wave the boy away like she was shooing a fly. So many lights floating around us, lanterns in a pond, and I could not help but shiver any time we drew near one. Eventually, I could make out a new shape in the gloom. A massive shadow, taller than any building I'd ever seen, 100 stories or more. It had its own glow that grew brighter as we came close. It was a tree. The girl that held me was tied to the tree by her gruesome thread. All of the lights seemed linked to the tree, strands ending gnarled in the branches, held like marionettes on a string. When we drew near enough to see the tree clearly, I began to thrash and fight, to struggle as best I could. Please believe me, I did everything I could. The tree had red-brown bark, rough and pitted. and in the bark, I saw mouths. Hundreds of mouths, millions. They were every shape and size, some grinning, some panting, some frowning. The mouths were filled with teeth, perfectly white in some, rotted and broken in others. Some mouths were massive enough to swallow a bus, and others tiny enough to bite a finger. I closed my eyes and clawed at my ears. The mouths laughed and screamed, but most of all they whispered things no one should ever hear or know. We drew right to the tree, the girl and I, next to one mouth the size of a wood chipper. Hungry, the mouth told me in the same voice I'd heard in the corner of my basement that morning. The girl grabbed my arm and stretched it out towards the mouth. I fought, yelled, felt my shoulder dislocate from the force of my panic, but I might as well have been trying to fight the tide. My hand went into the mouth halfway to my elbow. The pain was like nothing I'd ever known. In an instant, a piece of me was gone and I watched the mouth chew, taking its time, savoring. I whimpered, then shrieked as the girl began to pull my other hand towards the mouth. "Wait!" I screamed. "God, wait! Wait! Wait!" "Wait for what?" a smaller mouth asked from above us. "Hungry now," another mouth called from below. "Don't take any more of me," I pleaded. I can help you." "Help?" the girl asked. She stared at me with her ocean blue eyes. I felt the blood from my torn arm drip warm against my side. "Feed." I'm writing this on my laptop in my basement. The glow of the screen is the only light. It's not easy to type with one hand, but I'm adapting to my new reality quickly, I'm proud to say. The woman in the corner is sleeping. You know, big meals and naps. My arm is doing well if you're wondering. Burned shut and cauterized. Can't be too safe when it comes to infection. I was lightheaded from the blood loss, but the girl jabbed one of her threads into me, and now I'm feeling right as rain. Better than I have in a long time, actually. When she's awake, she tells me the most incredible things, like how there's a new star in the sky, a red star. The girl tells me about a coming cure for everything. But most of all, she talks about a hunger that's waking up all over the world, and that's what she wants me to tell you about. Keep an eye peeled, would you, for more like her. Check your basements, your attics, your old sheds and crawl spaces. Look to your hidden places and dark corners. You might just see a pale man or woman, hungry and in need of your help. I've got to go now. I can feel the girl stirring through the thread, hungry again already. My wife was so annoyed when I asked for her help, so reluctant. And she really overreacted when she saw my arm. But I know my daughter will be excited to finally be allowed to play in the basement. "Jenny, honey," I called. "Could you come down here? Daddy needs you." Story. Every morning I wake up, missing more pieces of my body. It started a week ago, out of the blue. One day I woke up and there was less of me than the night before. The first time it happened, I woke up missing a finger, my left index. There were no signs of it being cut, removed, or damaged. The finger was simply there one night and gone the next. The unexplained disappearance did put me into a bit of a panic. Unfortunately, the ER wasn't much help. I don't think the doctor believed me when I showed him my hand and told him there used to be another finger there. My hand had no scar, no evidence that something was taken. There was only an absence. The doctor was kind about it, suggested I should see a therapist, and even gave me a few numbers to call. I took a personal day and spent it at home, in bed, alternating between mindless Netflix watching and staring at my now unfamiliar hand. I knew, with absolute certainty, that a piece of me was taken while I was sleeping. Actually, more than one piece was missing. Besides the finger, some memories were gone. Obviously, I was distracted by my missing digit for most of the day, so it didn't dawn on me until later that other things were removed. Sometime around lunch, I considered calling my parents to tell them what was happening. But as I picked up the phone with my complete hand and tried to piece together how I would explain the day I was having, it struck me that I couldn't remember exactly what my parents looked like. I couldn't remember their names either. I could remember their voices, what my childhood home looked like, even my mom's favorite movie. But I couldn't catch a clear memory of my parents. They were always at the edge of my memory, like a dream dissolving in the morning sun. Speaking of dreams, I did remember having a vivid nightmare right before my finger was taken. The feeling of the dream stayed with me, but the details were burned away. I kept trying to bring it back. It felt like the nightmare and my missing finger, my lost memories, were all connected. Yet, no matter how hard I struggled, I could not pin down the dream. Frustrated beyond my limit, I quietly decided I was going crazy. I didn't want to burden my parents with my breakdown, so instead of calling them, I called my office and took off the rest of the week. It was sudden and disruptive, but at least I had time off to burn. I hoped a few days of rest would coax my sanity back to me. I went out to the liquor store, keeping my left hand in my pocket, and bought a week's worth of bottled therapy. The rest of the afternoon I spent getting beautifully, stunningly drunk. My last thought before passing out was that, of all the things you might wake up missing, one finger was hardly the end of the world. The next morning, I woke up without my right eye. At first, I blamed my unusual vision on the Navy's worth of rum I'd had the night before. But when I dragged myself in the bathroom, the mirror held a terrible correction. My reflection stared back at me with one green eye and one empty socket. Even the remaining numbness of the rum was no comfort. I screamed until I was raw, until my voice became another one of my missing things, though at least that came back later. I'm glad I have no close neighbors. I wouldn't wish the sound of me that morning on anyone. Once I'd pulled myself together, more or less, I tried to objectively assess my new reality. Like my finger, the eye was gone with no sign of damage or injury. If you'd never known me before, one might assume I was born with only the one eye, and that the empty socket with its deflated lid was just a genetic inheritance. But I knew that wasn't true. I took the best inventory of me as possible, under the circumstances, and found the eye wasn't the only new loss I had to reckon with. My memories of college were mostly gone. Gone also were a dozen other moments I was certain I could recall just the day before. I couldn't tell you my middle name. I couldn't remember the name of the first girl I kissed. Everything that was me was being chipped away. I was unraveling. And, much like the day before, I carried the certainty of a forgotten nightmare, a repeat of the first. Nothing I tried could bring the details into focus. It was like trying to watch a movie while deep underwater. All that came back to me were silhouettes and a sense of movement. That, and the lingering impression of fear, and a terrible sadness. I found myself crying in the bathroom, tears falling silently from my one remaining eye. The rest of that day was spent in shell-shock wanderings, haunting my own house like a living ghost. I paced from room to room, aimless. My house is large, with more rooms than I need. It's on a farm, and belonged to my grandparents before their passing. The walls are old and familiar, the floors well-worn wood dotted with an island of soft rugs. Everything about the house used to bring me comfort, but I was hollow that day. I didn't bother to eat, or read, or go for a walk in the nearby forest, which always brought me peace. I couldn't even work up the energy to drink myself dumb. The only way I could process my slow disintegration was to shut off my mind. I stayed awake for as long as I could. It was pushing 48 hours before I couldn't fight it anymore, and I fell asleep, slumped in a dining room chair. When I woke up, I found out that whatever was happening to me, it was accelerating. I held my left hand up, shaking. Another finger and the thumb were missing. I was now down a few toes as well. Exploring with my tongue, I counted 4 missing teeth. I wondered when I'd hit a breaking point when my body could suffer no more missing pieces. Just like each morning before, I woke still feeling the echoes of a dream that I could not recall. That was a rough morning. I sat at the table for hours, tallying and retallying my losses like a general after an ugly defeat. But I wasn't going to have 2 hopeless days in a row. I roused myself before noon, had a few drinks, then brought my laptop out to the living room. I set out to sit and drink and research, all while watching the autumn rain glaze my window. After an hour, I was slightly drunk, highly determined, and completely lost. Googling stolen body parts was predictably unhelpful. I was constantly redirected to articles about organ harvesting. Since I wasn't waking up in a bathtub full of ice each morning, I doubted any of that information would be useful. As I got up to fix another drink, which amounted to rum garnished with a lonely ice cube, I froze. What if I was missing an organ, Would I even be able to tell until it was too late? I gingerly pressed against my stomach. Everything still seemed to be there. I figured if something important was missing, it wouldn't take long for me to notice its absence. Outside, the sky began to fade to dark, casting shadows through my house. I pulled myself away from my computer screen long enough to move from room to room, flicking switches and turning on lamps. My goal was to ward off sleep again for as long as possible. The entire house was swollen with light. When I got back to the table, I dropped into my chair and stared at the computer screen. I just felt numb. The truth was, my failing body was the latest in a long line of spirit-breaking bullshit, and the cumulative depression was becoming too heavy to carry. Some days it felt like I was crawling across an endless beach, and the sand kept getting harder to move through the further I went. I rarely saw my family, sometimes just a phone call on the holidays. I cut out all social contact years ago. Somewhere in my 20s, friendships just became too much work for me to keep up with, and relationships, those always seemed to end ugly. I realized that I was the common denominator in all of those failures, so for the past 2 or 3 years, I've built my life around work and hobbies. I put myself into emotional quarantine because there was a perverse comfort in the isolation. But now that my world was falling apart around me, my body disappearing, I felt so alone. One night in the near future, whatever is taking pieces of me might take something I need, my brain, my spine, my heart. And then I'll be dead and no one will know until my office starts to wonder where I've been and sends someone to check. The thought of lying dead in my house for a week or more with no one the wiser nearly broke me. I tried to focus on a positive thought, but I struggled to find any warm memories to hold on to. Maybe those memories were another piece of me taken in the night, or maybe they'd never been in the first place. I looked at the ruin of my left hand and considered ending it all right then. There were pills in the bathroom, whiskey on the table. I even had a gun in a lockbox under my bed. I hesitated. Despite the circumstances, I found that I wasn't ready to go. At the very least, I wanted to know what was happening to me, why it was happening to me. The only clue I had was the fading echo of that dream every morning. I tried forcing myself to remember, but my mind could find no purchase. The dream was close enough to chase, but too far to catch. I said. I went back to my computer and searched Dreamcatcher. I spent 40 minutes reading all about dream catchers, their history, intended use, how to make one. They were originally created to hang above the beds of sleeping children, to ward off bad dreams and evil spirits. I figured it couldn't hurt to try. Half an hour later, I set my ad hoc dream catcher on the table. I didn't have string or yarn, so I'd had to use dental floss, woven through the frame of an old, stringless tennis racket. The final effect was completely ridiculous. "This is bullshit," I said out loud to my empty house. I went to crack my knuckles, remembered several were missing, and decided my entire week was bullshit, so maybe the Dreamcatcher was the answer to all my problems. Even though, as far as I could tell, Dreamcatchers weren't supposed to actually catch dreams so you could remember them, just trap bad dreams. Close enough, I muttered to myself, sitting the Dreamcatcher on the table next to my computer. I poured another drink, shaking the nearly empty bottle sadly. I knew I made a pitiful sight, alone in my old house, wearing old flannel pajama bottoms and a scruffy t-shirt. I decided to dive into some more research, see if there was something I missed, some silver bullet to bring my body and my mind back to me. I must have blacked out again because I woke up to the bright sting of sunshine, and I was outdoors. "What?" I mumbled. As I shook off the haze of sleep, I realized I was in a park. There were no parks near my house, but this one still looked familiar, all green and gently shadowed by tall oaks. I saw a dirt trail winding away into a wooded space, and a large playground in the distance. It looked like the old style of playground, all metal and wood and good memories. The kind of playground where you would spend hours as a kid, bumping and falling your way through a summer afternoon. There was a figure swinging on the swing set. Having no better ideas, I began walking down the trail towards the playground. I knew this park, and the farther I walked, the clearer my memory became. This was the park near where I grew up, where I played as a kid, and where I spent more than a few nights hanging out with friends in high school. It was even the place I had my first kiss. I was 14. Her name was Cassidy. Her face came into my mind vividly. I wasn't sure why the feeling was so strong until I drew close to the playground and recognized the figure on the swing. "Hey, Cass," I said, standing behind her. She turned to face me but kept swinging. "Hey, stranger." I think I gasped. There were lines and thin cracks all over her face, like broken pottery glued back together. Cass dug her heels into the ground, stopping her swing. "It's rude to stare," she told me. "Sorry," I said, still staring. Besides all the cracks and lines, her face looked how I remembered her, only older. Her hair was chopped short and blonde now. When we dated, she used to change the color often. I remember red being her favorite. Cass had delicate features, and her nose had a small tilt to it from when her dad broke it when she was a kid, and it healed off center. She smiled sadly at me, keeping her mouth closed like she always did, shy about her teeth being a little crooked on the bottom row. I'd always found her imperfections cute, and used to try very hard to surprise her, to get her to smile or laugh unabashedly. Sometimes she would, but only if we were the only ones around. Eventually, I collected myself and stopped staring. It was warm in the park. It felt like summer, even though it was November. Despite the heat, Cass wore an oversized dark blue hoodie. I realized it was one of mine I'd given her years ago. "How have you been?" I asked, kind of stupidly. She shrugged, then went back to swinging. Not having a better plan, I sat in the swing next to her and kicked off lightly. I noticed her hands on the chain of the swing had the same lines and cracks as her face. It reminded me of a puzzle. We swung in silence for a while. "The park looks nice," I said. "The trees look very green. For November, you know?" "You always say that," Cass replied. I stopped swinging. "What do you mean? When did I say that before?" "Last night," Cass said, still gently moving through the air. "And the night before, and the night before that, every night for quite some time. I'm not sure exactly how long." "I'm dreaming," I said. "Yes. This is the dream I have every night since." I glanced at my left hand with its missing digits. "I've heard that some people who lose limbs are whole when they dream, but apparently I carried my losses with me even in my mind." "Yeah," Cass told me. "This is the same dream, and we have the same conversation." "Well, at least it usually starts the same." "I'm confused. Is this just a dream? Is any of this real?" Cass stopped swinging again. She sighed. Fat white clouds floated in the sky above us. One crossed the sun and pulled a shadow over the entire park. We sat for a moment, listening to the birds call to each other in the trees. A blue and yellow finch landed on top of the nearby seesaw. Even in the shade, the air in the park was warm and smelled like grass and wildflowers. "It's a dream but real, I think," Cass said finally. "Real enough. This is where I came after my fall." She traced the path of one of the lines on her cheek. "I remember the fall, and then I remember waking up here, in our old park. That was a mindfuck. I'm not sure how long I was here alone before you started showing up. Not long." Her fall, the thin cracks like broken pottery all across her face. "Cass, are you dead?" I asked. She smiled, but only barely. "You always ask that too." "Am I dead?" Her smile dropped. "Number not yet, at least." "I'm dying, aren't I?" I asked. "The pieces of me that keep disappearing. Eventually I'll be gone." "Yeah, I'm afraid so." "Then what?" Cass nodded towards the woods. "I think you'll end up here, like I did." She started swinging again. I got off my swing and sat down across from her, on the edge of a merry-go-round. "What happened to you, Cass?" "It's a long story. The short version is that I got in a bad way, couldn't find a way out, so I stepped off a building." "What's the long version?" I asked. I paused. "You've had to tell me this story several times, haven't you?" She nodded and smiled, this time almost a full smile. After we went our separate ways, the next few guys I was with weren't great. Dad got sick, so I stayed with my parents for a few years. Mom was too strung out to be much help. I started using too, just trying to find a little bit of peace now and then. It didn't help much. The years just kept slipping by. There were times I would tell myself that it wouldn't be that way forever, that I could climb out, but each day it felt like a little more of me was used up. I couldn't find a way out, and one day not too long ago, I guess I woke up just hurting too much. Cass slowed her swinging until she was rocking with her heels on the ground. I'm so sorry, Cass, I told her. Thank you. I know you mean that, just like I know what you're going to ask next. You want to know why you're here. I smiled. You know me, always gotta grab the spotlight. I gestured to the playground in the park behind me. This, whatever this is, whether it's your own piece of heaven or, well, whatever this is, it seems like it's yours. Why am I here? And why am I held up what was left of my left hand. Cass stood up. Before I tell you, let me show you something. It's kinda upsetting, so just prepare yourself, okay? She began walking farther into the playground and I followed. We went around the monkey bars and past the jungle gym until we reached a patch of asphalt. This was the place I used to draw with chalk when I was a kid, to play foursquare and hopscotch. There was chalk on the asphalt now, but this time it was in the outline of a body. Within the white lines, there were a few body parts laying on the ground in the appropriate places, some fingers, some teeth. I recognized the single green eye staring blankly up into the sky as my own. I screamed for a long time. At some point, I sat on the ground next to the chalk outline. Cass hesitantly put a hand on my shoulder, then sat down next to me and wrapped me in a hug. She rocked me back and forth. I cried. The weight of the last few days, maybe the last few years, cracked something inside of me, but it felt good to be held. Thanks, I said. I think I'm okay now. Cass pulled away, but still sat close enough that our arms were touching. I hate to tell you this next part. Why? I asked. Because I hate hurting you. But this, she pointed at the outline with the pieces of my body inside, I'm pretty sure it's my fault. I stared at her. How? Why? Because I was lonely, maybe. Or because I was still hurting. We were just kids, I said. I'm sorry, but it was so long ago. I know, Cass said. I forgave you a long time ago for leaving, for lying, for everything. I winced. Cassidy and I dated all through high school, but I went away to college and she stayed in town. We grew apart, or at least I did, but I had a hard time ending it. She always was so happy to see me when I came back to visit, but my mind was never entirely there. I felt like my life was moving on but didn't know how to tell her. So I dragged, and I came up with excuses, and I visited less and less. I had a fling with a classmate, confessed, Cass forgave me, then I did it again. Eventually, I was the one to end the relationship. If it sounds like I was a piece of shit, it's because I was. The only excuse I can offer is that I was young and had always hated myself a little. Those excuses sound empty even to me. Screwing up my own life was one thing, but I've always felt guilty that I took Cass along for the ride. If you forgave me, then why? Why bring me here? I asked. Cass reached over and placed her hand over my damaged one. It wasn't a conscious decision, please know that. It's just, you know how people say your whole life flashes before your eyes when you're about to die? It didn't, at least for me. Only the good parts, the bright parts, came back to me while I was falling, and you were in every one of those memories. Us here, at the park at night, or on days when we had nothing else to do, or that trip we took down to the ocean, July of sophomore year. Cass was crying, silently, the tears running along the broken lines in her face. I felt sick for all the pain I'd caused her all those years ago. The main thing I remember, right before was our senior prom, Cass said, wiping absently at her eyes. Do you remember? For a panicked instant, I was afraid I didn't. But then I looked at Cass and it was like looking back through time. I could picture her clearly in her yellow dress. I could see her face as she was then, with no scars or lines. She'd smiled in the picture my mom took of us that night, truly smiled, no hidden teeth. I remember, I told her. I wore a yellow tie to match your dress, and I accidentally sat on your corsage. I felt bad because I ruined it. You didn't ruin it, Cass told me. I liked that it looked different from all of the other flowers. Being mushed gave it a personality. She paused. I kept it. I don't know if I told you before, but I kept the corsage, dried out in a box in my room. It's still there, unless my parents cleaned things out after Her voice broke and she started to sob. Now I was the one who drew her in close, wrapped my arms around her, and put my forehead against hers. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to bring you here. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. Please believe me." I did. She looked up at me, touched the temple near my missing eye. "I'm so sorry for everything that's happening to you. I think I'm just sinking, and you're caught in the drag. I don't know how to stop it. I keep trying. Whatever's happening seems to have its own momentum. But none of this is because I want to be cruel. I left the world lonely and scared. And in my final moments, all I could think about was how happy you made me, how real you made me feel. Even with all of the bad that came after, you gave me my 4 best years. From the moment I met you until you left, her voice cracked again. I felt loved for the first time in my life. My mom was too far gone, and my dad too angry. I never was much good at making friends. But you showed up with your bad jokes and your quick laugh and your trouble-making ideas that you always included me in, and I believed. I believed that life, like stories, might sometimes have a happy ending, that my story might have a happy ending. So when it didn't, when I took that last step, all I could think about was how much I wished things were different, how much I wished we could have just stayed young and in love forever. And I guess something out there heard me, and I'm sorry. I kissed her. I could taste salt from where she'd been crying. It felt good. It felt like going home. Cass kissed me back. "Did you know I was going to do that?" I asked. She shook her head. "This is actually the first time you did that." "Well," I said, "recent experiences have led to me slowly developing new perspectives. Plus, you look pretty good in my hoodie." Cass laughed. "Bullshit. This is my jacket. Now this we have been over." I pulled at the excess fabric around the hoodie. "You're like 100-pound soaking wee, and this is at least a men's large. There's clearly been a theft." Cass punched my arm, smiling, but it faded. "I am sorry. You had your whole life ahead of you. I didn't mean to drag you down with me." I looked around at the park, alive with the sounds and scent of early summer. I watched animals dart around the trees, moving between the silky shadows. I turned to Cass, who, even with the scars of life and death etched on her face, looked beautiful. "There are worse places," I said. "Thank God your happiest memories weren't of us in a bowling alley or something." Her laugh, again, and I couldn't help but laugh with her. "The sad thing is, you're not going to remember this conversation," Cass said. I thought about my silly little dream catcher at home. It probably wouldn't work, but maybe it would. Even if it didn't, I felt ready to remember. I would hold on to this memory, clutch it tightly when I woke up. I'd let a lot of good things slip away in my life, but this dream wouldn't be one of them. "I'll remember," I promised. We sat there for a long time. The chalk outline didn't bother me much anymore. I knew the pieces of me in there weren't missing. They were just waiting for the rest of me. "Hey, what's here outside of the park?" I asked. "Is there a whole afterlifey dream version of our hometown out there?" "I don't know," Cass said. "I haven't looked." "Why not?" "I didn't want to leave the park in case you showed up, since I never knew when that would be," Cass replied. "I didn't want you to wake up here alone." "Thanks," I told her. "I wouldn't want that either. But we should go look to see if..." That was the last thing I remember before waking up this morning. My right leg below the knee is gone. So is one ear, some fingers, more teeth, and I'm having trouble breathing, so I think I can add a lung to the list of parts waiting in the park. I don't know if the dream catcher really worked, or if I managed to keep my memory of the dream by brute force, but I remember all of it. I'm typing this out with my one good hand. The right hand is only missing the pinky so far. I want to leave this for anyone who comes looking for me. I want people to know that I was at peace with everything. I'll call my parents later, not to say goodbye, just to catch up, to let them know I was thinking of them today, even if I can't quite recall their names. I don't know how long it will take for me to transition from here to the park. I'm hoping it will be quick, that there won't be much pain. Whatever is happening seems to be happening faster every morning. I don't really think of this as an ending. It's more like going home. Story: The mean thing that lives in the cellar. There's a cellar connected to the basement in my parents' old house. A small room, barely more than a closet, probably used for storage. My family kept it empty and locked. That was where the mean thing lived. We moved into the house when I was 11, and Laura was 9. It was a big place, lovely to explore, to invent new games. But we never wanted to play in the basement. When we were down there, all we could think about was the cellar. The door drew your eye like a fresh scar on a child's face. There was a sense of coiled energy. If you got close to the door, there would usually be cold spots. My parents said it was just a draft, but they avoided the cellar, too. I even saw Mom burning something down in the basement every few months. It smelled like mint. When I asked her, she told me it was sage. Mom never said why she was burning sage, but I noticed the cold spots around the cellar went away for a while afterward. They always came back, though. Other than the cellar, that house was perfect, and our first year there was a dream. Even though all of us stayed away from the basement, we would joke about our downstairs guest. Anytime something went missing, strange odors or bumps in the night, we'd blame the thing in the cellar. For a while it was funny. Then the sounds from below came more and more often, knocking on the floor late at night. The entire basement caught a chill. A floating cold spot permanently settled across the room like a captive winter. Still, we were able to get on with our lives and ignore our guest for that first year. Then, the nightmares started. I would wake up screaming, the memory of being locked in a dark room with something fading quickly, but the fear lingering. Laura started having similar night terrors. I think Mom and Dad did too, though they didn't talk about it. One night in the summer, I woke up out of my bed. I was standing in the kitchen in my pajamas, the linoleum icy against my bare feet. I had no idea how I'd gotten downstairs. The basement door was wide open in front of me, the room absolutely dark. I could hear scratching sounds coming from where the cellar would be. Instead of slamming the door, running upstairs, or yelling for help, I felt drawn towards the basement. It felt like I was caught in some hungry tide pulling me away from shore. Part of me hoped I was still asleep, and that I was in the middle of another nightmare. But I knew it was real. The details were too clear. I was too aware. When I reached the door, I took a step into the dark, feet settling on the carpeted stairs. One step, another, and then I felt something shake loose. The tide broke and I was free. I pawed at the wall for the light switch. In my mind, the pitch-black basement was full of lurking, sharp shadows climbing up towards me. But when the light snapped on, the room was empty. I let out a breath, which turned to a whimper as the lock on the cellar turned with a click. Even from the top of the stairs, I could see the brass knob turning. The door drifted open, gentle, unhurried. Whatever was inside knew I was rooted to the carpet. I waited, frozen, for something to emerge from behind the door. A hand, an eye, a face. Something was inside the cellar, but nothing came out. Suddenly, dreadful curiosity sank into my stomach like a murder victim tossed into a lake. I needed to know what was behind the door, but the need felt like an invading influence. Halfway down the stairs, the scream incubating inside of me finally hatched and clawed its way out of my throat. Above me, I heard doors opening and my parents call out. The pull of the cellar was broken. I ran. Dad found me in the kitchen, curled under the table, bawling. "Cat, honey, what's wrong?" he asked. Something tried to make me go in the cellar. When he checked the basement, the cellar was closed and locked. But Laura admitted she'd been having nightmares about the door opening too. More than once, she told us she woke up out of bed either in her bedroom or the hall. I was the first one to make it all the way to the basement. Mom and Dad stopped joking about our guest after that night. Laura and I both had sleepwalking incidents over the next week. It got to a point where we started sleeping in our parents' room so they could keep an eye on us. Insomnia, the constant waking in the middle of the night, it all blurred together. One morning, Laura and I were both home from school. We kept falling asleep in class. Mom told our teachers we all caught the flu. Dad stayed home with us while she went to work. It was the last good day we would have as a family. I was napping on the couch while Laura sat next to me watching cartoons. She was holding Lemmy, her stuffed lemur. My eyes were red and heavy and kept falling before snapping open. I could hear the sounds of Dad shuffling around in his office upstairs. The last thing I saw before drifting off was Laura looking at something behind the couch. Sleep took me for a moment, maybe two, but no more than that. When I opened my eyes again, Laura was gone and Lemmy was lying discarded on our big blue rug. I sat up immediately. Laura took Lemmy with her everywhere. He was her comfort, her protector. Something was wrong. I moved slowly, weighed down by a dreadful gravity. My suspicions were confirmed when I walked into the kitchen. The basement door was open. It was hard to see into the room even during the day. There were no windows down there, and the light was off. "Laura?" I called out, barely able to force out more than a whisper. No answer. I took a deep breath, moved to the top of the staircase and fumbled for the light switch. Something grabbed my wrist from the dark. I opened my mouth to scream, but the grip was gone. Breathing hard, I flipped the switch and light filled the basement. Laura was standing in front of the cellar, staring ahead. The door was open. There were tears on her cheeks. I couldn't see what she was looking at. As I watched, the door opened a little further and she took a step forward. I've never gone downstairs as fast as I did that morning. All thought, even fear, was burned from my mind. There was only Laura, the door, and space between us. She was almost at the cellar before I reached her. I ripped her back as hard as my small frame would allow. We both fell to the floor, but we were safe. Neither of us went into the room. Looking down into her red eyes and puffy cheeks, I felt a roar of protective love. "Laura, are you?" Before I could finish my question, I felt a grip around my ankle. I had just enough time to see the horror stitched to my sister's face, a reflection of my own. Then I was yanked back. Carpet and friction tore my skin as I was dragged into the cellar. The door slammed and then I was alone in the dark. My scream must have shaken the house. I scrambled back, unable to see anything but ink black all around me. Bumping into the wall, I put my arms up. Laura was yelling something from the other side of the door, but she was muffled, distant. From the corner of the room, I heard breathing. "Who's there?" I whispered. "I hear you." The breathing stopped. A clicking sound began. It reminded me of teeth chattering or too many insects gathered in too small a space. Something laughed in the cellar. I felt my bladder go. Then someone was pounding on the other side of the door. Cat, open the door, honey," my dad yelled. "Unlock it, okay? Just unlock it." I pulled my knees into my chest. "I can't. Something is in here with me. Daddy, help." Thud, thud, thud. My dad was slamming his shoulder into the door trying to get to me. The air became freezing. If it wasn't so dark, I knew I'd be able to see my breath. I tried to inch closer to the door. The clicking grew louder. Hands, cold and sharp and strong, grabbed me all over. It hurt. It hurt so much. I shrieked. Dad hit the door over and over again, but it wouldn't open. He stopped. "Cat, are you okay?" "Help," I sobbed. "It's hurting me. Dad, I'm not playing, I promise, I swear. Something is in." The hands squeezed harder. I struggled to breathe. It was quiet for a moment. "Take me," Dad said. "Give her back and take me. Whatever you are, give me my goddamn daughter back. Take me instead." The unseen grip loosened. Air rushed back into my lungs. Ahead of me, a small line of light slit the dark. The door was opening. I saw my dad outlined against the bright basement. He was never a big man, but that morning he stood so tall. I'll never forget the way he looked in that moment, how much I loved him. Dad took a step into the dark, then another until I couldn't see him. Suddenly, I was free. I scrambled towards the light of the doorway like a drowner panicking towards the surface. The second I was out of the cellar, the door slammed. Dad was still inside. I knew for sure because he started to scream. Laura came to me and held on to me, and we stayed there listening to the horrible sounds coming from the cellar. Growling, shrieking, yelling, slamming, begging, scratching at the door. It sounded like a pack of animals tearing at my dad. I tried not to picture his skin ripping, bones cracking, the pain he must be in, the pain he took for me. I'm not sure how long Dad was in the cellar. Couldn't have been more than a few minutes. Then it was done and the door opened and Dad stumbled out. There wasn't a mark on him. He looked down at Laura and me. His blue eyes faded. Dad squinted, confused, then turned away and walked up the stairs. Laura was happy, glad that Dad wasn't hurt. But I knew that wasn't true. Even if he looked okay, I was certain something terrible had happened, some kind of violence that would leave wounds. I was right. Dad was never the same after that morning. He became angry more often. All certainty fled from him, and his days became a series of unconnected scenes, jumbled, a bird with one broken wing in freefall. The light in him was gone, but the body remained and did its best. We all did our best. It was no good. Mom fought through it for a year, through Dad's new meanness, his loss of memory, his dissolving act. The man she loved, I think, died in that cellar, and what came out was only scraps. After the divorce, Laura and I lived with Mom. We moved out of the house. Dad stayed. His decline was both steady and sudden. When I saw him, there would be a little less there, like a song I loved, slowly stripped of its notes every time I listened. Mom stopped visiting first, Laura a few years after. Only I kept going back. The price he paid was paid for me. Even when there came a time where he couldn't remember my name, I would never forget what I owed him. And, every now and then, he almost came back. When I told him I was getting married, when I brought his first grandchild to meet him, flashes of my father returned. I will always be grateful for those little minutes. Dad passed away last week. His body gave out. I hope whatever was trapped in his bones is free now, off to find what was stolen from him years ago. He left the house to Laura and me. She wants no part of it. She has her own life now, a family, won't even talk about the cellar. Laura calls it my coping mechanism for what happened with Dad. I know there's something evil in that room, something real, something hungry and cruel that took my dad away from me when I was a little girl. I won't risk my husband. I won't risk my son. But the house is mine, now, and though I've grieved for my father every day, his death is a raw wound that I can't seem to close. God help me. I think I need to go into the cellar. Story. I met a modern-day plague doctor. He is desperate for a cure. In terms of anonymous online job postings, it wasn't the strangest I'd ever answered. The ad offered a ludicrous amount of money for a single day's worth of work. What that work would be wasn't really spelled out. The only information provided was an address, the promise of $5,000, and one short sentence describing the nature of the task. You will be helping Dr. Paolo. He is trying to save the world. Pretty fucking ambitious of the doctor, but for $5,000 I was fine, enabling some crackpot's fantasies. Lord knows I've done worse for less. That's how I found myself standing in front of a quiet office park at 4 a.m. this morning, hoodie pulled tight against the early autumn chill, chewing my lip and trying to puzzle out how such a weird job led to such a cozy location. The office buildings were clean, white, and chrome. The plaza in between well-groomed and crossed with cobble pathways that ran artfully from building to building like stone rivers. There were even tiny fucking bonsai trees. What a trip. I double-checked the address on the posting and walked towards the appropriate office. I did a subtle pat against the concealed holster on my right hip just to remind myself it was there. Technically, I didn't have a concealed carry permit, or handgun license for that matter, but with the unregulated kind of work I did, I figured it was worth the risk, especially for today. Working with the kind of doctor who posts anonymous jobs to the web and promises to pay in cash? That's a lot of red flags if you're the kind of person who prefers to keep their organs snug and comfortable in their original packaging. Still, $5,000 for one day of work was too tempting to write off entirely, so I told myself I'd scope the guy out, then cut and run if I got a bad vibe. The tidy office park put me a little at ease, I'll admit. I was expecting an abandoned warehouse or meatpacking plant, or a deserted junkyard at the edge of town that only serviced ice cream trucks and panel vans. The usual. The lobby lights were off, but the building's door was unlocked. I walked in cautiously, and soft lights snapped to life. My hand was halfway to my holster before I realized the lights were on motion sensors. The interior was a mirror image of the exterior, white, polished, full of marble and modern angles. It was trendy. I didn't like it. There was no one at the front desk, but as I drew closer, I noticed a big blue post-it on the counter. Dear, my name. Half of your money is behind the desk. The rest will be paid upon completion. Please meet me in room 8. Dr. P. I walked behind the desk and found a large red duffel bag. Inside of the bag were several stacks of fresh $20 and $50 bills. I'll be damned, I said. Here was the money, half of it at least. There was the door. I nearly walked out. I wish I had, but my curiosity was like gasoline in search of a fire. I simply could not help myself. I walked down the hall counting doors until I reached room 8. The door was unlocked. Shit, I whispered. The room was cavernous, much larger than I would have expected, larger than should have fit in the entire building. Hospital beds stretched in neat rows and aisles as far as I could see in every direction. Small white cots with white blankets in a room as pale as a deep-dwelling fish that had never seen the sun. Everything was spotless, but everything, everywhere, was sickness. You could smell it on the air, the nauseously sweet odor of rotting things and bodies dying slow deaths. Everywhere I looked, I saw misery, people writhing in pain on the cots, sweating and moaning. A few were begging, many more were silent. There was another sound as well, faint but persistent. It took me a moment to realize it was music. Quiet, cheerful elevator music. Several rows to my left, I noticed a man bent over a bed, checking the pulse of an unmoving body lying tangled in sheets. The man stood up and turned towards me. I started to shake. The man was dressed as a doctor, white coat, tie, stethoscope, and all but I couldn't see his face. He was wearing a black mask with huge eyes and a long beak. Slowly, he raised a hand and gave me a little wave, then turned and pointed. That was where he wanted me to go. While I stood there, my mind stuck on loading, unable to process the scene, another doctor in a black bird mask wandered. He was whistling. The second doctor stopped when he noticed me. Then he too gave me a little wave and pointed to the same destination. No, I whispered. Please. The doctors just stood pointing. A third doctor approached from I'm not sure where. She was dressed identically to the other two and carried a chart. She didn't bother waving when she came close, only pointed. Her foot tapped in a pantomime of impatience, and I felt a heavy dread settle in my stomach. Okay, I said. Okay. I began to walk. As I went past the rows and rows of beds, I saw nightmares I could have never imagined. I watched a masked doctor comfort a woman with a pad on her hand, while she shrieked as something inside of her began clawing its way out. In another bed, several doctors held down a man as he jerked and twitched, massive red pustules forming and bursting across his chest so rapidly I could hear them pop. The smell was staggering. Not far away, another woman had fallen from her cot and lay tangled in a pile of wires. I drew closer and realized the cords that wrapped around her weren't wires. They were greasy blue veins. When she tried to stand and rip some of the veins loose, I saw they were connected to her. Somehow they'd just gone from inside her body to out. She didn't scream when she ripped the veins. She only sunk back to the floor into a fast-growing puddle of her blood. A doctor approached her with a mop, but I did not stay to watch. After what felt like hours walking among the dead and dying, I finally reached a door. This is where the masked doctors had sent me. The door was unusually tall, bright red with a frosted glass panel. Above the panel was a name written in golden letters. Dr. Paolo. Feeling like I was in a fever dream, I knocked. "Come on in," said a voice on the other side of the glass. I opened the door and was immediately blinded by beautiful golden light. I screamed in pain and joy. I'm not sure which feeling was stronger. "Sorry," said the voice. "Forgot about that." The light was gone, but all I could see was blackness. "Yep," the voice continued. "Looks like we burned those out. That must have smarted something awful. Hold on, we will patch you right up." I felt a hand reach out and touch my face. Not just touch, but enfold. The darkness lifted and my vision returned, blurry but quickly clearing. The room was well lit and comfortable, spacious, but dominated by a large desk in the center. A man sat behind the desk, smiling slightly at me. He was dressed like the doctors in the ward, except this man wasn't wearing a mask. His face was flawless, inhumane in its perfection, like a statue come to life. "It's good to meet you," he said. "I've been waiting so very long for today." The man stood up and I saw that he was tall, impossibly tall. He didn't so much stand as unfold himself from behind the desk. My name is Dr. Paulo, he told me. I couldn't speak. I couldn't find any words. Dr. Paulo's smile widened. I understand. Today is a big day. He winked and reached behind his desk. The rest of your money, the doctor said, handing me an identical red bag to what I found in the lobby. His hands were so large he only used his thumb and index finger to hold the duffel. Plus, a little extra, call it a bonus for being timely. I clutched the bag to my chest, mouth working, still unable to speak. Finally, I managed to choke out a few words. You said, the ad, you need an assistant? The doctor shook his head. No, I have assistants, my little birds out there. What I need from you is much more important. I need your help spreading the cure. The cure for what? The cure for you, he said. Why don't you have a seat? I plopped down instantly. Luckily, a chair was somehow behind me. I held the bag closer, a security blanket. Dr. Paolo sat down on the edge of his giant desk. I don't understand, I said. What do I need cured? No, the cure isn't for you. The cure is for everything else. You are the disease. I shook my head. I don't. You, he continued. All of you, people, humans, you are the greatest plague ever inflicted upon this planet. You burn, and you kill, and you take, and you pollute, and you use, and you breed, and your offspring continue the cycle in an ever-worsening spiral. You were given paradise, and you poisoned it. You were given everything, and you ruined it, spoiled it, used it all up, and never showed an ounce of gratitude at the unfathomable depth of gifts and blessings you so casually healed into the dirt. You are a plague. You are the plague, and I have spent so very, very long looking for a cure. I've tried so many times throughout history, but always you managed to survive, to outbreed your losses, to come back worse than you were before. He leaned back and chuckled. You're like aggressive bacteria, harder to kill than cockroaches. But cockroaches, at least, have personality. So for the sake of the cockroaches, and every other thing that walks, swims, flies or crawls, for the sake of the deep water and the soft skies, the trees tied to the earth, and the wind that touches those trees like a lover, for them and for the rest of the planet, I have created a cure, and you will carry it to the rest of your ugly little species. I was crying silently. As he spoke, I saw images of every casual horror, every atrocity mankind ever wrought. I saw forest fires dance behind his eyes, heard atomic bombs drop in the silence between his words. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, I said. The doctor leaned forward. I know. The sorriest thing I've ever seen. But today you can rise above the blood and muck and violence of your previous life. Today you can help me save the world. Why me? I whispered. He shrugged. You answered the ad. Are you ready? I couldn't speak. Paolo smiled again, then leaned closer. He filled up my vision. He was an eclipse. As I sat trembling, the doctor gently kissed my forehead. The dread I'd carried with me since I'd opened door 8 finally bloomed into numb acceptance. In the kiss, I felt a transfer, something insubstantial but inevitable, as heavy and as hidden as guilt. You are my cure, he told me as he drew back. Now go, travel, explore, spread. I woke up alone in my apartment. That was 3 days ago. I've convinced myself that I was drugged, that the doctor must have tested some kind of hallucinogens on me, some new drug, something vivid. I'd say the entire experience was a dream, except that there are 2 red duffel bags swollen with cash in the corner of my room. Enough money to get away. Enough money to see the world. But to do that, I would need to leave my apartment, and the truth is, I've been feeling a little under the weather the past few days. Time waits for no man, though, so this morning I booked tickets for a flight, for a trip. We're living in strange times. There are reports of a red star in the sky and people going crazy. You never know how much time you have left. I think I should see the world while I can. It's almost like there's a little voice in my head telling me go. So, I'll walk down to the pharmacy later, stock up on meds for the plane ride. This new cough is becoming persistent. Then I'll pack my bags, and I'll take my cash, and I'll go on a grand adventure. Yeah, Eddie answered. It was. The smell of cinnamon and the ocean was gone, but they were easy to recall if I closed my eyes. I glanced down at the miniature lamp keychain. The brightness was now a soft bluish glow. I smiled and brought the charm back to Eddie. We have to remember to leave this on the windowsill tomorrow so it can catch some sun. You never know when we'll need a little light. We'll never go back to that hospital. In fact, we decided to use some of the money Mom and Dad left us to move. I heard a rumor from a friend of a friend about an unusually lucky neighborhood a few towns over. The area isn't just fortunate. This is a place where sometimes sick people get better. There's supposed to be some weirdness there too, but I'm finding that my family has a high tolerance for weirdness these days. If things ever go bad, we'll always have Eddie's lantern, and I know none of us will ever face the dark alone. Story: A light in dark places. The hospital near where we live has an ugly reputation. Its official name is Nottingham General Hospital, NGH, but everyone calls it Not Going Home. The building is out of date, the staff either too new or too burned out, and even the lights seem to struggle to shine. If you're dying, it's a good enough place to die faster. But if you're hoping to recover, you should keep driving. That's why, despite living less than 30 from NGH, we take my brother Eddie to the big city hospital 3 hours away for his chemo. Besides the air of misery, there are other, darker things I've heard about Nottingham. They say even small sicknesses can blossom into something fatal there. They say the halls are haunted, that there's blood in the food, and that the dead dance in the morgue at night. I'm sure it's all bullshit, but I have to admit, even driving past the place, there's a wrongness to the tall building, like a dirty scar on the skyline. There was another reason I avoided NGH. It was where both of my parents died, less than a year ago, and less than an hour apart. I would do anything I could to keep my family away from Nottingham, but last week Eddie developed a cough that turned into a wet choking in less than a day. We had no choice but to rush him to NGH's emergency room. Pneumonia. Eddie was touch and go for a few days. Ben and I stayed in the room with him the whole time, sleeping on the chairs. I appreciated that the doctors didn't chase us out after visiting hours. I doubted the hospital got that many visitors in the first place, so maybe the staff appreciated the company. On the 4th day, we took Eddie home. The docs wanted to keep him another day for observation, but he'd stabilized, and we'd had our fill of the place. All of us had nightmares every night we stayed at Nottingham. I didn't ask Eddie and Ben what they dreamed about. For me, it was 2 dreams that played on repeat. The first nightmare was about a doctor walking slowly down a hallway towards me, fluorescent lights above flickering out and dying as he came. The man was dressed in stained green scrubs. I could never see the doctor's face. The lights kept cutting out just in front of him. I could smell him though, the sick sweet scent of industrial ammonia, hints of copper and rotting meat. I always woke up just as the doctor got ready to walk into Eddie's room. In the second dream, I walked down a long staircase. There was a door, and I didn't want to open it, but I couldn't stop. The door led to the morgue, and I saw my parents' bodies both laid out on cold stainless steel tables. They were naked and each had a raw, red, Y shape cut into their chest and stomach, fresh stitches barely holding the cut together. It's how I imagined they must have looked after their autopsies. Both of them died in the same car accident. My dad as soon as they got to the hospital, my mom not even 10 minutes after. The 2 of them were on a date, the first they'd taken in probably a year. Eddie being so sick for so long, it was hard on my family, but my parents in particular. It seemed so terribly unfair. All Mom and Dad wanted was one night for themselves. A bad tire and a patch of ice later, and they were gone. Ben came home from college after the accident. Somebody needed to watch over Eddie and me while we finished school. In 2 years, I'll be done with high school, and I can do more to help. Maybe take turns with Eddie so Ben can pick up some classes. We were making shit up as we went, but we were together, at least. When we got home from the hospital after Eddie's ER visit, as soon as Ben opened the door, Maggie tackled into us like a gray gold cannonball. "Did you miss us?" Eddie asked, still a little short of breath. Maggie wagged her tail and pressed her head against Eddie's percent. Her fur was faded from the years, but when I looked at her, I saw the same puppy my parents brought home the week Eddie was born. Ben and I had demanded a dog for years, and Mom and Dad thought it would be nice for Eddie and Maggie to grow up together. No roughhousing, Ben said, doing his best to sound stern. I couldn't tell if he was talking to Eddie or Maggie, but they both did their best to look chastened. You gotta take care of yourself, Eddie. You're still on the mend. Eddie, looking bony and tired, still managed to grin. I'm the picture of health. We couldn't help but grin with him. Then he coughed. Ben had the car keys out, and my arm was halfway back through my jacket before Eddie talked us down. Just a tickle in my throat, he promised. We slowly relaxed. Even Maggie looked concerned, big brown eyes fixed on Eddie. Hey, Eddie asked, sounding scared for the first time in I don't know how long. Has anyone seen my lantern? He began frantically going through his pockets. Eddie's panic infected the rest of us. Ben was about to drive back to the hospital, ready to tear the place apart, when I noticed a lump in the inner pocket of my sweater. Eddie, I've got it, I said, pulling out the object. I picked it up from your nightstand when we were leaving the hospital, just to be sure we wouldn't forget it. The lantern was actually a keychain, a miniature version of the lamppost from the Chronicles of Narnia. It was scaled down to fit in your palm, copper cast and solar powered, so if you left it in the sun for a few hours, it could produce a weak glow at night. It was the last gift my mom gave Eddie before she passed. The chemo was taking a toll on him, months of it, life-saving poison that burned up body and soul. In one of the worst stretches, my mom gave him the little lantern. She quoted Tolkien, told Eddie to let the lantern be a light in dark places when all other lights go out. Mom, Eddie, and Ben all loved their fantasy. I took after my dad, not so much a daydreamer, but I knew there was power in stories. Eddie took the keychain from me and hugged me close. Thanks, Liz. He cupped his hands around it, put his eye close. Eddie looked up, disappointed. There's no light, he said. I think it needs some sun. I moved a strand of hair out of his face. Yeah, I don't think we got enough sunshine at the hospital. Even on bright days, Eddie's hospital room, the whole damn building even, seemed to stay in the shade. Put the lantern on your windowsill and leave the blinds up tomorrow. Speaking of light, said Ben, walking into the dining room, would you like to fire up the candles, Ed? Eddie sprinted after Ben so fast, I was surprised the little guy didn't give the floor a friction burn. I smiled as I watched them both duck into the other room on the way to the den, Maggie on their heels. I followed after, at my own pace. We kept Mom and Dad's ashes in wooden urns on the mantel. Mom was in maple, Dad was in cherry. Next to each urn, we kept a candle that reminded us of them. For Mom, it was cinnamon. Her season was always winter. Mom put so much effort into organizing the perfect Christmas song playlist every December we used to joke she should DJ as a side hustle. Dad's candle was the ocean. He'd lived for the trips we'd taken as a family to the shore, for fireworks in July. Even after Eddie got sick, we still managed one last trip to the boardwalk together that summer. We light those candles every night, and it makes it easier to remember Mom and Dad. Cinnamon and sea salt, first snow and summer sand. When the smells fill the house, it's almost like we're all together again. There's gravity in those moments that keeps our memories from drifting too far away. Ben, Eddie and me, and Maggie spent the rest of the day making sugar cookies and watching Lord of the Rings for the millionth time. Eddie made it most of the way through Two Towers before falling asleep on my shoulder. I didn't want to disturb him, so Ben and I stayed in the den. We both must have nodded off right around when the orcs dragged Frodo, and Sam went to follow. I was woken up by a knock at the door. Eddie was still sleeping on the couch next to me. Ben was stirring. He was as light a sleeper as me. Maggie was nowhere to be seen. But I could hear her in the other room. She was growling softly. The knock came again. Ben looked at the clock above the television. Little late. Are you expect? He began to ask me. He stopped when we heard the front door open and close. It was locked, I whispered to him, standing up. Maggie came backing into the room, still growling. She was facing the dining room, which connected to the foyer. What's, huh? Eddie asked, still half asleep. Ben and I were both standing now. We'd put the candles out, but forgotten to turn off the light in the den while we were watching the movies. The dining room and the rest of the house were dark. Is someone there? Ben called out, taking a step towards the other room. No one answered. The smell of ammonia and rot washed over me, and I nearly retched. Jesus, Ben gagged, covering his mouth. I felt Eddie grab my hand and squeeze. I squeezed back. Maggie began to growl louder. The den lights were weakening my night vision, but I thought I caught the shadow of a man next to the dining table. If someone's there, you better go, Ben continued. We called the police already, and we're armed, Maggie barked. And we have a dog, and she has fucking rabies, so fuck off. We stood in silence. The shadow in the other room moved closer. You left, a voice whispered. Too early. Still need help. There was something wrong about the dark in the dining room. It wasn't a gradual darkness, lighter near the den and shadier further back. Instead, the gloom was almost solid, hanging like a curtain between the two rooms. A hand reached out from that blackness, followed by an arm. The hand was covered by a dirty latex glove. The arm was wrapped in stained green scrubs. It pointed at Eddie. Come back, it said, voice hushed. Sick, 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 hospital. Get the fuck out of our house, Ben whispered. It was still pointed at Eddie. Give. Maggie snarled. Ben stood a little straighter. Not going to happen, he said. The lights in the den flickered, then went out completely. Ben shouted and Maggie yelped. I froze. The lights came back, but they were dimmer, like they were dying. Ben was still at the threshold between the den and the dining room. He had his hands up like a boxer. There were fresh scratches and cuts all over both arms, and something had torn the collar of his shirt. He was breathing heavily. Maggie had lost some fur, and there was a small streak of red on her side. She was favoring one of her paws, but still standing. They were both still standing between me and Eddie and whatever was in the other room. The gloved hand reached out of the darkness again. There were bright red splotches visible against the faded white latex. Give, it said, pointing at Eddie. Fuck you, Ben replied. Maggie growled. It sounded like she was agreeing with him. The two of them made an unusual pair. Ben, my skinny big brother, was wearing green flannel pajamas and an old Radiohead t-shirt. Maggie was so old we had to carry her up and down the stairs every night so she could sleep in Eddie's room. But seeing them standing there, they looked like giants to me. I wouldn't have traded the two of them for a platoon of Marines. I knew that whatever followed us wasn't getting to Eddie without a fight. The lights flickered again and I screamed, nearly choking on the smell of ammonia and old blood. It was like the darkness in the other room was oil, slowly flooding the rest of the house. The thing's arm reached a little farther, coming out to the shoulder. Shadows in the dining room were pulled with it, like fabric stretching. I was terrified that the stretching would continue until something ripped, and then it would be in here with us. Please, God, I whispered. Please. I felt Eddie squeeze my hand. A moment later, he pressed something small and metal into my palm. I turned to look at him. It'll be okay, he whispered to me. I won't let anything hurt you. I opened my hand. Eddie had given me his charm, his lantern on a keychain. I felt all of the fear drain out of me. There wasn't enough room in my heart for fear. It was overfilled with a fierce love for my brave little brother, for my entire family. A love so animate it hurt. I turned to Eddie and smiled. He looked so small in the low light, so fragile. The cancer had taken its cut of him, the treatment taken as much or more. But, like Ben and Maggie, Eddie was still standing. My poor brother, all of us, we'd been through so much hell over the past few years. It wasn't fair for some nightmare to chase us home, to try to take more from Eddie than the bill the world had already called in. No more fear then. But there was room in me for at least one other emotion besides love. I looked at the arm reaching out from the dark and I felt rage. How dare this thing come into our house, hurt my family, come calling for my brother? How fucking dare it? The lights flickered again, then everything was black, but only for a moment. The room lit up with a blue-white brilliance. I felt warmth in my hand. The light was coming from Eddie's lantern. I could see my brothers and Maggie clearly. There was a hidden shape, tall and crooked, caught between the two rooms, right on the other side of Ben and Maggie. There were two other shadows in the den with my family, standing next to Eddie and me. I could smell cinnamon. There was a chill in the room, but pleasant, like the first cool night in the winter. The cinnamon faded and was replaced with the scent of the ocean, and my hair stirred in a warm summer breeze. I began to walk towards the blackness in the dining room. The two familiar shadows walked with me. "Leave," I said. "Never come back." There was a swelling pressure, and then it was like the world exhaled. All of the shadows were gone, and I was alone in the house with my brothers and our dog. Ben and Eddie were staring at me. Even Maggie looked confused. "Was that?" Ben started to ask, trailing off. Story. We cover all of the mirrors at night. Gran loves mirrors, but she said we need to cover all of them in the house every night. "Mirrors are fine things in the daylight," she told me once, pulling a heavy black drape over the vanity in my bedroom. "But mirrors are so close to windows, little bird, and at night they get even closer." I stopped brushing my teeth as Gran moved to cover the bathroom mirror. "What's so bad about windows?" "I don't know about you, darling, but I don't think I want people looking in at me when it's dark and I can't see them back. Besides, if mirrors are windows, well, any window is a door if you push hard enough." She clicked her teeth and laughed in her sing-song way. I shivered as she finished taping up the thick tarp across the glass. If I looked long enough at night, could I see through the mirror? If I pushed, would it open? I stared so hard into the black cloth, I imagined I could see the threads as they slithered around each other. Was that a glint of silver under the material, the smallest rip in the fabric? Closer. Was that my reflection looking back, the barest suggestion of an eye? I blinked. It didn't. "Come to bed, little bird," Gran said, holding out her hand. "I'll tell you another story." With a final glance over my shoulder at the covered mirror, I followed. In the winter, we were never cold. That was nice. I'm not sure what it was about Gran's house, but the chill never managed to slip in, even on days when the wind came calling against the old walls. I can only remember being cold once. As I walked past a covered mirror in the kitchen, Gran asked me to get her some water. As I moved by the mirror, I noticed the black material over the glass ripple. There was a coolness on the other side. I leaned in close, probably closer than I should have, and I thought I could hear bells, maybe even smell snow. I missed the snow. Gran called out, asking if I was having a hard time finding the water. I hurried on. In the spring, I can hear the rain dancing on the roof as I help Gran cover the mirrors. I can feel the sun setting, even if I can't see it. "I miss the sun," I told Gran. "The rain will stop eventually. Can I go out when it does?" Gran smiled, the wrinkles in her face spreading out like ripples in a pond. "We'll see, little bird." We were at the big mirror in the hallway, the fancy one with all of the vines and ships and animals carved into the frame. Gran called it scrimshaw. I thought that was a funny word. "Out of tape," Gran muttered. "Stay here and face the wall, okay? I'll be right back." She moved away, limping a little. I obeyed. The mirror behind me was mostly covered, anyway. A long curve of shining glass that stretched nearly the entire length of the hall. I didn't turn around, I promise. But while I stood there, I was so sure I could smell flowers. My hair stirred in a breeze that wasn't there a moment before, and I felt sunshine? Something warm on my neck. Then Gran was back, biting off a strip of rubbery tape and tucking the mirror away safely into the dark. She left for the bedroom, and I followed. I felt another shiver using my spine as a ladder. If the smell of flowers could come through a mirror, what else could? A voice? A hand? Teeth? In the summer, you could feel the warmth outside if you touched the walls where they were thinnest. But inside it stayed cool and dim. Gran was sleeping a lot. Most days she'd only wake up long enough to uncover the mirrors in the morning, then to hide them again at night. I asked her once why she even bothered to unwrap the glass during the day. "How else would I see the world?" Gran snapped. Some days she was so tired she'd ask me to uncover the mirrors in the morning. A few times she even trusted me to wrap them up in the evening. I never peeked. Not until the night I heard someone saying my name from the other side. "You, Laura. I miss you every day." The voice was coming from under one of the mirrors I'd already covered. My hand was shaking so hard, I almost pulled the entire piece of fabric off as I lifted the corner. Instead of my reflection, I was looking into a bedroom. It wasn't like my bedroom in Gran's house. This place was colorful. There were posters on the wall, and the bed even had a blanket. The sheets looked clean. I missed that. There was a girl in the room kneeling at the foot of the bed. Her hands were clasped, and her head was down. Wherever she is, even if she's with you, please take care of her. Amen. The girl looked up, and then her eyes snapped to mine. I must have made a noise, a gasp, something. She looked so familiar. Dark hair and eyes. She was like an older version of my reflection. Assist. What are you doing? Gran asked from behind me. I jerked away from the mirror. The last thing I saw from the bedroom was the terrified girl staring back. It was an accident. I thought I heard my name. Gran put one gentle hand around my cheek. Long fingers coming around to the other side. Little bird, don't worry, you'll forget your name soon enough, and it won't bother you any longer. Gran turned and began to limp down the hall, shoulders brushing against the ceiling. Tape the cover back and come lay down. I made a decision that night as I lay next to Gran. It was awful, sleeping next to her, cold. Her breath always smelled like meat that was left out too long. Gran was so thin, all bones in her skin was hard enough to leave scrapes on me when she pulled me tightly in her sleep. There was no comfort in her, no warmth. I missed home the most on those nights. The longer I stayed with Gran, the more my memory began to dry up. I knew she was right. Eventually, even my name would be gone. But for at least a little longer, I remember. I remember my home, my parents. I remember playing in the yard under the willow, weaving crowns of daisies in the spring. And I remember my older sister playing with me, even if I can't recall her name. I remember. I've tried going back through the mirror, but it doesn't seem to work from this end. Or maybe it does, but only Gran can make it work. There's nothing to write with anywhere in the house. The mirrors, though, they fog up, and I can draw with my finger in the blur I create on the glass. It's taken me all night to write this message out one breath at a time. The space is massive, at least on this side, but I've still used every inch and have so much left I want to say. I love you, sis. I hope you find this in the morning. Maybe it'll fade, but if you get close enough, if you happen to breathe on your side of the mirror, if you do see this, please know I'm thinking of you and Mom and Dad. I miss you all more than anything. Gran. I don't think Gran will ever bring me back. She told me before that she wants me to be like her. I don't want to be like Gran, but I already feel myself changing, stretching. I'm scared. Tonight, though, at least for tonight, I'm still me. I'm still Laura. I love you. I can hear Gran moving, waking up. If she catches me, goodbye. Tell Mom and Dad, well, maybe don't tell them. I thought about waking you up, but I didn't want to scare you. I'll watch you, for as long as I can. Love, Laura. I used to think my room was haunted when I was a girl. My sister disappeared one summer, but I always felt that she was with me. Once I even thought I saw her looking at me from my vanity's mirror. When I was 13, I found the above story scrawled backward across that same mirror. Mom and Dad thought I did it myself. They got upset. Now that I'm older, I can understand why. It scared me then, so I never told anyone else. I kept looking for any sign of Laura in the mirror, but never saw her again. Not until last night. I saw something in the mirror in my daughter's bedroom. It might have been my sister. Once, long ago, the thing appeared familiar and watched my daughter sleeping. When I blinked, it was gone. I'm taking all of the mirrors out of the house today. I miss my sister, Laura, with all of my heart, but I never want to see her again. Story: Pedro is a state of mind. The whispering started about a week ago. This was around the same time I found the lump on my temple. There was some correlation between the two that was obvious from the beginning. I was making breakfast when the low murmur I'd been hearing all night coalesced into a voice. "Good morning," the voice said. The sound was high and scratchy like a breeze swollen with spring pollen. I stood entirely still while my eggs sizzled weakly in the cast iron pan on the stove. Hello?" I said out loud to an empty kitchen. "Your breakfast smells great," the voice replied cheerfully. "I am the devil, and I'm going to eat your fucking eyes." I dropped my spatula. Could you repeat that? I asked, pulling my bathrobe tight against a sudden chill. The part about the breakfast? Or the other part? The other part. The voice confirmed that it was the devil and repeated its plans for my eyes. It then added some new information. Its name was Pedro. Deviling was its occupation. It was whispering to me for years and was surprised I finally heard it. The voice suggested I get that lump on my temple checked out. After I finished throwing up in the bathroom, existential dread always has a way of making me nauseous. I examined the lump. It was roughly the size of a marble, firm to the touch and paler than the skin around it. There was no pain when I poked at it, but the voice did increase in volume. It was singing now, the voice, not the lump. Christmas classics. I felt something lick the back of my left eyeball. I screamed. The voice stopped. My morning kind of went downhill from there. I gave up on breakfast, feeding my half-fried egg to the trash can. Instead, I tried to drink the world back to being rational, first with wine, then with rum. All I accomplished was getting piss drunk by 11 a.m., literally piss drunk. I couldn't stumble to the bathroom in time, so I ended up relieving myself in a collection of succulents and cacti that Mary used to decorate the living room. The voice stayed quiet throughout the entire time I was debasing myself, but it was a fragile silence. I got the impression of something waiting for its turn to speak. After my blackout nap, Pedro returned to whisper to me again. "How are you feeling? There's piss all over the rug, you know." I felt a horrible, gentle pressure on the back of both of my eyes. It was as if teeth were resting on the orbs, the enamel not quite breaking the surface tension. But at any moment, those teeth could snap and grind and chew. I whimpered. An invisible tongue rooted somewhere in my skull began licking from the inside out. "Oh Jesus. Jesus Christ, please stop," I begged. "Have you checked on your lump lately?" Pedro asked. Gingerly, I pressed at my temple. My fingertips came back stained with a greasy white-yellow liquid. The substance smelled like rain leaking from an overflowing dumpster. The lump had opened. I prodded again and realized that the mass had actually split, like a tulip greeting the spring. There were curves and ridges and flesh and a hole in the middle. My head had given birth to a third ear. "Your fucking eyes!" Something screamed inside my mind. The volume was staggering, lighting up my nerves like a Christmas tree doused in gasoline then struck by lightning. I fell off of the couch and curled up on the floor. Pedro was silent for the rest of the night. The next morning, after calling my office to let them know I'd quit and would never return, I found a fourth ear blossom. It was a little lump on my left side just below the rib cage. When I shined a light on the mass, I could clearly see the outline of a tiny ear no bigger than a quarter. Over the next week, more and more of the lumps sprouted and then erupted into new ears of various shapes and sizes. I was spotted with them, chickenpox made of new body parts. My fingerprints deepened, then spread until they became swirling walls of flesh. Tiny ears covered both hands. When I pressed my fingers to the wall, I heard such terrible sounds. "This is Hell's Radio," Pedro told me. "Listen, use your new ears, all of them, fields on fields of them." "Why?" I asked. Pedro didn't reply. I woke up later that night to the new, horrible sensation of teeth biting my eyes. There was a tremendous pressure, sharp objects jabbing into me. "Wait," I begged. "Please stop." Both orbs popped together. Something was chewing on my optic nerves, ripping and munching on the deflated sacs that used to be my eyes. My vision went black, true black, the absolute absence of light. I screamed until I passed out. While I slept, I dreamed of massive trees dangling lights from their branches. In that dream, the sky was starless, save for one bright red dot against the black. It looked like a stab wound hanging in the air. When I woke up, there was no more pain, but I was blind. Not only blind, eyeless. There was a wet, sticky substance leaking from my sockets. I brushed it away with fingers that were completely covered in small ears. They were everywhere now, the ears. Small and large, they sprouted from every inch of me and dragged the sound into me like hooks bringing in fish. I was nearly deafened by the roar of noise every time I took a breath. My neighbor's television sounded was so loud I wept more of the fluid from where my eyes should have been. The planes flying above, the satellites in their drift, all of it was agonizing, all of it was crystal clear. Worst of all was Hell's radio and the promises Pedro made. I heard him making croaking sounds as I crawled across the floor. The rasp of my stomach ears dragging on the carpet was so painful I vomited. I couldn't see the sick that came out of me, but judging by the texture and the chunks left in my mouth, even my puke was filled with ears. You should have listened to me, Pedro gloated, when I told you not to listen. I can feel Pedro slinking around in my head as I write this final account. He's hungry and loud, licking at the meaty contours of my brain. His tongue feels like a Christmas tree made out of razor blades. It's difficult to type with each fingertip ending in a soft shell. Not being able to see the screen doesn't help, either. But I can hear the keys as I press them. I blink some of my face ears and can almost listen to the story stitching itself together. But not quite, so please excuse any spelling errors. Hell's radio crackles and flows all around me. When I feel the first teeth nibbling at my gray matter, I open my jaw ears to laugh. Story. Stain. I haven't been sleeping well lately. When I dream, I see a sky full of blazing yellow suns. In the dream, I shut my eyes against the brilliance, but the light still burned through. I tried to blind myself, fingers pressing into my irises. Nothing could stop the violent sunshine. Then I'd bolt away covered in sweat and scratches. So I wasn't sleeping much at all. The insomnia gave me a lot of free time though. That was nice. I started taking long night walks throughout the city, soaking in the starlight and dark air. I never set out with a destination, just slipped into my boots quietly to avoid waking Daria. The city was a living thing, as restless as I was, and the streets carried me safe and sheltered. Until the night I met the man in the stained suit. He was standing off the street at the edge of a retainer wall pissing into the harbor. I assumed he was homeless, another broken member of Baltimore's ruling class. The man was short, gray suit blotched with dark puddles and rings, a Rorschach test made of spilled wine and dust. I could see him clearly, standing in the dirty orange glow bleeding from a streetlight. When I passed, the man turned towards me. He smiled as I looked away and began to walk faster. Connor. I stopped. The man was staring at me, still smiling. His face was a map of lines and scars, his skin unhealthy in the streetlight glow. It was hard to tell in the shadows cast by his hat, but his eyes were so large they seemed lidless. Mouth so wide, I wasn't sure he had lips. Connor, stay a while, he said, walking to a nearby bench. Sit. I'm very alone. How do you know my name? I asked, moving no closer. The stranger scratched at his gray-veined beard. You've been having bad dreams lately, eh? Sit, Connor, he said, patting the bench. I didn't want to join the man, but the way he spoke, my name was quietly commanding. A silk noose that pulled tight if I thought about walking away. We sat together on the bench for a long while, listening to the night sounds, the city exhaling, the rumble of distant traffic, and the splash of the nearby harbor. Do you ever wonder why we only see the one sun? The man asked, fidgeting with a threadbare tie. It's because we only ever look with a few of our eyes. Would you like to open some more? I talked with the ragged man for a long time, but don't remember any of the rest of it. The sun was licking the horizon as I made my way back from the harbor to my apartment. Daria was already awake, cooking breakfast and avoiding eye contact. Her pink bathrobe was looking worn, fraying at the hems. I made a note to buy her a new one, something nice, for her birthday. I bit my lip when I realized I couldn't remember when that was. The day, even the month. Daria looked me full on for the first time since I came in. She was so pretty, my darling Daria. Time had taken siege to her, like the rest of us, but her eyes still shined in the morning light. Her dark hair was traced with a few twists of gray, much less than my own. Only her hands showed her years. Still, they were nimble enough to dance across a keyboard, soft enough to want to touch. She was giving me the most peculiar look as she slid my breakfast in front of me. You were out late? Daria asked, joining me at the table. I chewed on toast, enjoying the feeling of the burned bread on my tongue. Couldn't sleep. Where did you go? Night walking. Daira rubbed her hands. I worry about you, Connor. Thanks. I smiled with my teeth full of eggs. Did you hurt yourself? I wrinkled my eyes, confused. Daria gestured towards a spot on her throat. Gently, I touched the same spot on my neck. A rough patch, and under the skin, a bump. Excuse me, I muttered, food falling from my mouth. I moved quickly into the bathroom. Sunlight drifted in through the half-open blinds, catching floating dust in bright beams. It was enough light that I didn't bother flipping the switch. In the mirror, I noticed an angry red scratch and a perfect straight line on the side of my throat. The area bulged, slightly. Hand shaking, I poked at the spot and winced at the electric kiss of pain. Everything was tender. Prodding with one hand, I used the other to flip on the lights for a little better clarity. As I pushed the skin to either side, I saw the scratch split open. A green eye stared out from the wound, iris darting wildly. The scream caught in my throat. Only a wet, choking sound made it out. "Are you okay?" Daria called from the kitchen. "Fine," I lied. This new eye jolted up, watching me in the mirror. Not sure what else to do, I rummaged in the medicine cabinet for an ace bandage. Once the eye was concealed, I headed for the bedroom, nearly bumping into Daria in the hall. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, just tired from my walk. Gonna lay down. Before I do, I have a stupid question. What color are my eyes?" "Blue," Daria said, pressing her lips together. "Did you forget?" "I guess," I muttered, moving into the bedroom and closing the door. When I woke up, Daria was in the bed beside me, asleep. Moonlight slipped in through the curtains, and city sounds called to me. The bandage on my neck was wet and smelled like old meat. I could feel something twitching on the side of my throat. I ignored it. It was time to walk again. While I slept, I dreamt of the sky full of suns again, and my skin still burned. Night air was just the ticket to fix what ailed me. Hours later, I came back to my apartment, soles a little thinner, scraped across Baltimore streets. I found the man in the suit waiting on my steps. He looked even worse than the night before, like he'd been dragged and soaked and dragged again. One eye swollen shut with a raw purple bruise, the man smiled as I drew close. "Who are you?" I asked. "What's left?" I could smell him off the breeze. Body odor and vanilla. "What's left of what?" I asked, hesitant to climb past him. "A stain. You can call me that, if it makes you feel better." The man hopped up and went into my building first. He was short, walking with an uneven gait. I wondered how he got in without a key. "Hurry up," he called down, taking the steps two at a time. "Where are you going?" He ignored me. A plucked string of panic sounded off in my head. I could picture this stained man knocking on my door, Daria answering. It wasn't a comfortable thought, the way I knew he would look at her. I took the stairs quickly to catch up. We stopped at my floor. As we came closer to my door, I tried to calm down, afraid the screech of my pulse might burst the veins that carried it. But we didn't stop at my apartment. The man approached the door across from mine, Miss McGrady, a lovely widow who sometimes invited us over for cards when she was lonely. Stain knocked on McGrady's door. "Don't answer," I whispered, surprising myself. Stain didn't turn, but I could sense his grin widen. Miss McGrady opened the door. "Hello? Can I help?" "Oh, Connor, who is your—" Stain tackled my neighbor, kicking the door closed as they tumbled into her apartment. I stood stunned for a moment, and then Miss McGrady began to scream, high-pitched. The sound of a rabbit in a lawnmower. I ran to her door, locked. I banged and I pulled and I put my shoulder into it. The door held and the screaming ended in a wet gurgle. Something started to hum, and there was the sound of a knife at work. I fell, stumbling back to my apartment. It felt like it took years for me to put lock to key, even longer to throw the bolt once I was inside. For several minutes, I stood looking out the peephole. Miss McGrady's door opened, and something waved to me. It looked like McGrady, but stretched tight over an ill-fitting frame. Her wrinkled skin was unnaturally smooth. McGrady's eyelids and lips were gone. A thin, red tongue slipped out between rotten gray teeth. The thing in McGrady licked her missing lips, then winked. I sat for hours with my back against the door, a living barricade in case anything came knocking. Connor. I rolled my head to find Daria watching me. She was wearing a pair of leggings and one of my old t-shirts. They always looked so much better on her. I must have fallen asleep, I mumbled. Against the door? And Jesus, what happened to you? Were you in an accident? I stood up. I'd been dreaming again. What do you mean an accident? You're covered in scratches and bruises. Cold settled into the space between my lungs. I touched the bandage on my neck and felt something soft twitch. Looking down at my arms, I saw dozens of shallow cuts, each with a little lump underneath. Have you been fighting again? Daria asked, scanning my face for a liar's tell. I know it's been a bad year, Connor. I know you're hurting, right? I'm hurting too. I miss her just as much as you do. Daria brushed fingertips over her stomach absently. But you can't just keep disappearing. It's getting bad, Connor. I'm not sure I recognize you anymore. You need help. I just need some sleep, I whispered, pushing past Daria. Her words were like little wasps crawling into my ears. Too distracting. Too much pain on the way. I locked myself in the bathroom. My reflection was swarmed with cuts, thin lines with moving shapes under the surface. Lumps swelled and wiggled within my skin, on my face, neck, arms. I could sense them under my clothes across every inch of my body. The room was so horribly bright. I flipped off the light. In the dimness, I felt a nauseating release. Suddenly, I could see everywhere in the room at once. I turned away from the mirror, but it didn't stop me from seeing my new reflection. Dozens of eyes had opened all over my body. They were every shape and color. Were they grown? Were they stolen? The surreal insanity of my body crashed into me. I screamed. Daria was banging on the door. Connor? Connor? There was a pocket knife on my keychain, a slim red Swiss Army model. I pulled out the larger of the two blades. My hand was shaking so violently that I nicked my arm twice before I could bring the knife over one of the eyes near my wrist. The pain dragged a sound out of me I wasn't capable of making. A shriek like a mother finding their child dead in a summer-roasted car. But I kept cutting off as much as I could. They wouldn't close, and the world was too bright to bear. Connor. A different voice from somewhere else inside the house. I opened the bathroom door and stumbled out past Daria. Jesus, what did you do? She whispered. I could see her following behind me as I moved into the living room. The front door was wide open. Connor, what did you do to yourself? Daria asked again, reaching towards me. No, I said. Stain was back in his dirty suit, standing behind Daria. Don't hurt her, I begged. Stain only raised a finger to his lips. He tiptoed closer to her, exaggerated movement like some sick cartoon. Connor? Daria asked, seeing the look in my eyes, all of my eyes. Con. I wouldn't let him have her, not Daria. I took a step forward, but the room was becoming so dark. That's when I slipped. I'd forgotten about the blood, my blood. I'd cut so much away that the floor was slick with it, my clothes soaked in it. The last image I saw before the dark closed in was Daria leaning over me, Stain peeking over her shoulder. Daria was bandaging my cuts when I came awake. Oh good, I wheezed. You're okay. Daria grinned at me with a lipless grin, her eyes wider and more dazzling than I'd ever seen. She leaned in to kiss my forehead. The lovely scent of sweat and vanilla washed over me, and I smiled back. That night I dreamt of dead black suns, boils on an endless gray sky. They were left to rot like apples in an abandoned orchard. I never slept so well. Story. There's a new star in the sky. A red star. Whatever you do, don't look for it. We started the project with the best of intentions. We wanted to build a beacon, a signal fire to announce to the universe that we are here. We are searching, and we, in turn, hope to be found. Construction on the Terrestrial Orbital Relay Communication Hub, TORCH, began nearly a decade ago. The relay was built in secret, with a small team, and launched quietly once complete. We wanted to avoid the controversy we'd seen with new technology like the Large Hadron Collider and, honestly, we didn't have the highest hopes for success. TORCH was something new, An orbital satellite that emitted a constant signal across 1,000 different spectrums, all imperceptible to humans, powered by an experimental generator that promised greater range to our beacon than anything we'd tried before. Still, it's a big universe out there, and myself and the rest of the team didn't expect any return on our investment, at least not for several generations. So we kept quiet about Torch, launching it into orbit during routine tests of my company's latest rocket model. I have to admit, it felt good to have a secret from the rest of the world, to know that Torch was up there rotating above us, a light in the darkness, a tolling bell we could not hear but others might. Torch was in orbit for less than 3 years before we heard the first rumors about the Red Star. My company has a friendly rivalry with NASA. We joke that they are the old guard, hands tied by politics and budgets, but sometimes they still beat us to the punch. I used to work at NASA myself, until the siren song of a thriving private sector pulled me away. I kept in touch with some of the former team, meeting every now and then for a beer or a game of darts. Our only rule was no shop talk, so I knew something was wrong when Benny asked me about work. "Have you noticed, well, anything out of the ordinary?" he asked, long fingers tapping on the table next to his untouched drink. It was just the two of us meeting for a beer. I'd been rambling on about the difficulties of trying to build a chicken coop in my backyard since we arrived at the bar and hadn't noticed his distracted expression. "Define out of the ordinary," I replied after a moment. The room was nearly empty, not too much traffic at 4 p.m. in a dive bar, but Benny stilled, leaned in close, voice dropped to a whisper. "There's something out at the edge of our vision, our equipment. It's inconsistent there, 1 hour, gone the next, never in the same place twice. A tangled mire of electromagnetic interference and white noise that we can't." Benny clenched his hand in frustration. "We just can't." I took a drink, finishing my beer, trying to process what I was hearing. "You said this, whatever it is moving?" I asked. "Constantly." Benny looked me directly in the eye for the first time since we sat down. There was fear written onto his face, the primal terror of the first man who heard thunder and didn't know what it meant. "I think whatever it is, it's coming towards us," he said. I promised Benny that I'd keep an eye out and let him know if we found anything. That night, lying awake in bed, I kept telling myself he was getting worked up over nothing. It was most likely an equipment malfunction. Lord knows the only thing holding NASA together these days was elbow grease and red tape. As I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't help wondering if Benny was right, though. My last waking thoughts were of Torch floating above the world in its widening gyre, slouching from horizon to horizon. The machine was both beacon and bell, candle and horn, shouting humanity's existence into the empty dark. But what if the dark wasn't so empty? What if the dark saw the little flame we shot into the sky? What if the dark was curious? I couldn't tell if I was more afraid or more excited. The first public rumors of a new star in the sky, scarlet and bright, came in less than 48 hours after my beer with Benny. It didn't take long for reports of the Red Star to pour into my company. According to witnesses, the star would shift around the sky, not just each night but every few minutes. Some people claimed to see it clear and sharp, while others said it was barely a crimson smudge on the sky. We detected occasional blips on our sensors like flashes of polar lights, but nothing concrete. The star, for us, remained a phantom. It took a lot of money and favors being called in to keep the reports from the news. We needed more time to investigate before the story broke. If it was nothing, if the Red Star was some hoax or mass hallucination or natural phenomenon, then Torch would stay a secret. But if this really was first contact, our logistics team was already working on plans for the parade, and our CEO was on at least the third draft of his Nobel Prize acceptance speech. We kept searching, electronically and by telescope, for any sign of the Red Star. On the 5th night after my meeting with Benny, I saw the star with my own eyes. Work was rough that day, more unverified star sightings, but something else. There were new stories of hysteria, even violence from some who claimed they saw the Red Star. There was an unsettling account of a man taking his family onto their roof so they could see the star just as he had the night before. When his wife and kids tried to go to bed, the man reportedly tied them up in chains and staked the chains into the roof. Then, when his family became tired and their eyes began to close, The man removed their eyelids with an X-Acto knife. At least, that's what we heard, but it seemed like an urban legend to me. Bullshit or not, I couldn't stop thinking about the family on the roof, bodies chained, eyes open, as I waited in my backyard looking up at the sky. I was out there for hours with my telescope, one of the best personal models money could buy. The sky was beginning to turn lavender with first light before I finally pulled away and sat back. I blinked tired eyes and glanced up, and it was there, razor red and bright, right above Ursa Major. I froze. Have you ever been caught in a riptide? It's a horrible feeling, the dragging inevitability of an invisible force pulling you away from shore into deep water. That's how I felt staring at the red star. There was a tugging sensation that lasted for what felt like hours, and then a quick, terrible snap. Suddenly the star was growing larger, closer, brighter. I realized with growing horror that I was moving towards the star. As my perspective rapidly approached the object, I began to make out details. I could see the exterior of the star. It was difficult to gauge the scope of the thing, but I pegged it as either a small planet or massive asteroid. The surface was a dark maroon beneath the crimson light. It was pockmarked and pitted, scarred and crumbling like rotten wood. Ugly brown tendrils crisscrossed the planet. I thought of congealed veins on a dead leg, or worms on the sidewalk after a rainstorm. I tried to stop, but I couldn't break the riptide. Closer and closer. I could see that the holes and cuts in the surface were deep. I was drawn towards one of the pits and felt myself stop above the deep dark. Then, the pit opened, and I realized it was an eyelid. I stared down into a human eye the size of a city, bright blue and intelligent. The eye blinked and focused on me. I saw it was sharp and clear, and I knew, without any doubt, that it saw me. And I knew it hated me. The raw malice crushed me, and the terror was enough to finally break the pull of the star. I felt extraordinary vertigo, then falling. I blacked out. When I woke, I was back on Earth in the bathroom of my house. I had no recollection of leaving my backyard. The sun shone clear and autumn warm through the window behind me. For a moment, I convinced myself the red star was the worst nightmare I'd ever experienced. Then I felt something move my head until I was looking in the mirror, and I felt something blink. My eyes, and when they opened, my green eyes were gone, replaced with cobalt blue. Something smiled with my mouth. I screamed, ripped myself away from the mirror, fell, struck my head and was out again. That was earlier today. When I woke up, I kept my eyes closed and crawled into my bedroom. It must have taken me an hour to open them, even longer to fumble towards my buzzing phone. There were a dozen missed calls and even more texts. Calls from Benny, from work, from other members of the Torch team. The texts told a story. Reports of red star sightings jumped exponentially the night before, as did unconfirmed rumors of violence and disturbing activity among those who saw the star. We wouldn't be able to keep the story from the news much longer. My boss wanted all hands on deck. He still saw this as a golden opportunity for us to reveal Torch to the world, to claim credit for finding signs of life out in the stars, for welcoming that life to our doorstep. Something in me shifted. Something was getting comfortable. I felt sick, violated, and strangely claustrophobic. I had a passenger. I don't know how much longer I will be me. Already I'm hearing whispers, thoughts in my head that I'm not sure are my own. The only certainty I have is that I must shut down Torch. Maybe it's too late. Probably it's too late. But if I can stop Torch from sending its signal, if I could kill that beacon, then maybe the star will lose track of us. Humanity can crawl back into a dark cave and hide and wait until the predator passes by. In the old stories, fire was a protector. The light kept the monsters away. But in reality, I think the light just got their attention. I'm uploading this record in case I fail. Even if I succeed, I think I'm already gone. I am sorry. We started with the best of intentions. If I can't shut off Torch, or if the red star is already too close, you'll know soon enough. It will be in the news. It will be all of the news. Be careful. Stay indoors, particularly at night. Go underground if you can. Whatever is coming, try to wait it out. Should you find yourself outside at night for any reason, keep your eyes down and guard up. If you see someone standing perfectly still, staring up into the starry sky, Run. If they notice you, if we catch you, I will make you look. Mysteries are everywhere, and some may be closer than you think. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next mystery. See you in the next story.